Hi everyone, welcome to the visual guide for Eden's Verse Furor Savage. This is the second new Savage raid made available by patch 5.2 in Final Fantasy XIV Echoes of a Fallen Star. Please note that strategies are still being optimized for this fight and may change over time. My name is Mistech and I'll be your raid guide. The encounter begins facing off against Garuda. To help with mechanic positioning, tanks should keep Garuda in the center. Superstorm will deal high raid-wide damage, shield and heal as necessary. Occluded Front will spawn wind orbs that will shoot out long line AoE attacks across the platform. It's important to note that these line attacks have the ability to destroy any tether style attack throughout the fight, forcing that initial attack to apply to a random player instead. While this isn't really relevant at the moment, and most strats remove the majority of opportunity for this to happen, it's important to understand that this can happen to save you some headache down the road. Storm of Fury is a massive point blank circle AoE underneath the boss. All players will need to move away from this. At the same time, damage dealers will be tethered for extra conal attacks in their direction. The group needs to avoid overlapping this damage, so each damage dealer is assigned an intercardinal point to point their tether towards. This intercardinal positioning also allows each player to dodge the point blank AoE without having to cross over any line AoEs, ensuring the tethers are never destroyed. Since the conal attacks are quite large, we also assign a tank and healer to stand with each damage dealer at the intercardinal to ensure they don't accidentally get hit by more than one. Next up, each damage dealer will be marked for air bump. This mechanic requires two players to soak this damage, and we use the same intercardinal pairings to handle this without overlap. Once the damage applies, a circle AoE will be left behind that all players will need to move away from. FEROSTORM will then form two massive blades on opposite sides of Garuda in a random orientation. All players must move to the unaffected sides to dodge this attack. Next up, this blue marker will knock back all players a set distance from the center. At the same time, each tank and healer will be marked for air bump. An easy way to handle this is to simply use your knockback immunity and stand with your partner at your assigned position around the boss to avoid overlap. Don't forget to move out of the secondary AoE circle afterwards. Immediately after, Garuda will jump to the center and cast Vacuum Slice, dividing the platform in two from north to south or east to west. Players will not be able to traverse this area once it's set, so the group will need to split into two, maintaining their original pairs to ensure that a tank, a healer, and two damage dealers are on each side. Garuda will cast Occluded Front, and large wind orbs will appear on the platform in one of two set patterns. She will then cast Storm of Fury, a point-blank AoE circle will appear, and all damage dealers will be tethered. Furthermore, large knockbacks will push all players and the wind orbs towards the center void zone. Once the knockback resolves, the orbs will then explode in large AoE circles. Obviously, there's a ton happening during this time, so let's break it down. As stated earlier, the orbs can spawn in one of two set patterns. One side will have one pattern, while the other side has the other. The first possible pattern is 3 orbs in a line evenly spaced across the side. In this pattern, the safe spot is between one of the outer orbs and the center orb. The second pattern is 4 orbs on the side, with 2 side orbs closer to the void zone, while the 2 center orbs are further away. In this pattern, the safe spot is at each edge, in the lane behind the orbs closer to the void zone. Since each damage dealer is tethered for Storm Fury, the assigned pairs will move to the safe spot closest to their normal assigned position, regardless of the orb pattern on their side. This will ensure that no player is taking more than 1 hit of tether damage, and the safe zone positioning will allow them to avoid the incoming orb explosions after the knockback. Immediately after, the Void Slice will disappear and Garuda will cast another Ferðstorm. Players will need to quickly adjust to avoid the attack. At this point, a proximity-based damage marker will appear on the north side of the platform and Garuda will disappear. Ifrit will slam down, dealing raid-wide damage. Hands of Flame will tether the primary tank for mild damage, afflict them with lightheaded, and drop an eruption beneath them. The lightheaded debuff makes any player susceptible to getting thrown up into the air and stunned for a while if they're hit with another attack during this time. To avoid this, we have the off tank Provoke the boss as soon as the main tank is tethered. All players must ensure they're not standing in the eruption telegraph before it explodes. Instant Incineration will then target the primary target with a tankbuster. Cooldown and heal as necessary. Immediately after, Meteor Strike will target the ground underneath the tank for lethal damage. To avoid this completely, all players must ensure they're nowhere near where that tank was standing during this time. INFERNO HOWL will deal high raid-wide damage. Healers beware. Next, Hands of Hell will target a random random healer with this shareable tether. This specific tether attack will also apply lightheaded to affected players, and you'll need to assign specific players to handle each round of tethers. This first one will be gathered by the healers and 2 ranged players. To easily handle this, the group that's up for tethers can stay behind the boss, while everyone else moves to the front to avoid accidentally grabbing a tether. At the end of the cast, Ifrit will split into 4 and slam into each tethered player, afflicting them with lightheaded and dropping eruption telegraphs beneath them. Since this attack is pretty wide, each tethered player must ensure they're far enough away from one another to avoid getting hit by more than one attack, or they will get concussed, be unable to move, and then die to their own eruption. Next, Strike Spark will spawn a number of fire orbs around the platform. Ifrit clones will then appear and begin to kick 4 of the orbs away. Players will also drop eruption telegraphs underneath them at this time. To handle this, players can remain stacked in the center to bait eruptions. While they do this, they'll need to identify which Ifrit clone is kicking an orb away to form a safe zone. There will only be one possible safe zone, so if you happen to notice another Ifrit clone kicking an orb back into what you think is a safe zone, it's not a safe zone. As soon as those eruptions pop up, players can move into the safe zone to avoid the orb explosions. Next up, Hands of Hell will target a random damage dealer. For this round of tethers, we assign all damage dealers to grab a tether, while the tanks and healers hover around the front to avoid accidentally grabbing one. These tethered players will spread apart and wait for the Ifrit clones to slam into them. Once those eruptions are dropped, all players can readjust to avoid the explosions. Immediately after, the primary tank will be tethered for Hands of Flame, and a tank swap is necessary. This is again followed by instant incineration, and the new tank will need to cool down through that damage, and then move away from the front to avoid Meteor Strike. At this point, Ifrit will disappear and then return to the platform with Garuda. Both bosses will immediately cast Hated of the Vortex or Hated of Embers, applying a debuff on players that makes them only be able to damage one of the 2 bosses. Each debuff will target 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 damage dealers, and can be baited based on your proximity to each boss during the cast. To facilitate this, we split the group in half and have each group stand under their respective boss. Garuda will then cast Occluded Front, forming wind orbs around the platform that will throw out line attacks. Ifrit will then target his tank for Hands of Flame. While you can provoke here and handle each part of the incoming busters like you normally would, we actually found it much easier to just invuln through this combo at this time. Garuda will cast Vacuum Slice, dividing the platform in half again. This time, the entire group can congregate on one side and should stack together for the incoming mechanics. Occluded Front will again spawn more orbs, and an Ifrit clone will pop up next to an orb to kick it away. Players will need to identify the safe zone, but not move into it just yet. Eruptions will target players, and you should bait these in the center to avoid overlapping your safe zone. As soon as the eruption telegraphs pop up, players can move into their safe zone before the knockback and orb explosions. Immediately after, Ferðstorm will cast, and players will need to quickly adjust to avoid this attack. At this point, Garuda and Ifrit will disappear and a phase transition begins. Throw up some raid cooldowns and heal through the formation of Raktapaxa. I'd recommend pulling the boss into the middle again to give yourself ample room for the incoming mechanics. Hands of Hell will then target a healer, and all tanks and healers will be assigned to grab these tethers. In this phase, along with the mechanics and debuffs associated with it already, Hand of Hell or Flame will also cause large room-wide AoE attacks on either side of the tether to form. This has the effect of forming a small safe zone underneath the original position of the boss. Since you don't want eruptions covering this only safe zone, all tethered players must make sure to move enough away from the boss before the cast goes off. All players can then collapse into the safe zone. Next, another Hands of Hell will target a damage dealer, and this time all damage dealers will be assigned to grab these tethers. Again, tethered players need to make sure they move far enough away to ensure their eruption does not cover the safe zone. Another Inferno Howl to heal through, and then Air Bump will target all tanks and healers. Share this damage with your assigned partner, and then move out of the secondary AoE circles. At the same time, Ferostorm is being cast, and all players must dodge out of their circles into the safe areas to avoid the blades. Next up, Strike Spark will spawn fire orbs around the platform, and Ifrit clones will appear next to random orbs to kick them away. Wait for the eruption telegraphs to form underneath you, and then move into the safe zone. During this time, the primary target is again being tethered for Hands of Flame. This can be handled with another tank swap and extra movement, or you can be lazy and invuln this combo as well. Next up, another knockback from the center, and the boss will reappear in the middle to cast CONFLAG Strike. First, fire puddles will cover the majority of the platform with only 2 safe zones on the east and west sides of the boss. At the same time, 2 pairs of tanks and healers will be chained together, and 2 pairs of damage dealers will also be chained. If you move too far away from your chain partner, you will explode and probably die. To handle this, we have all the tanks and healers stack in one safe zone, while all the damage dealers stack in the other one. Once the fire puddles explode, 2 fire tornadoes will spawn in the north and the south. These tornadoes will throw out massive conal attacks in the direction of the closest player. At the same time, wind orbs will appear that will throw out line AoEs towards the furthest players from them. The tricky part here is handling all of the mechanics while also ensuring that the wind lines do not intersect any of your chains, or they will break and you will die. To handle this, the 2 tanks will split to the north and south tornadoes to bait the conal attack. They'll move to the side of the tornado opposite where the wind orb spawns and angle the attack towards the outside of the arena. The healers chained to each tank will have to move with their partner and stand in front of the tornado, far enough to avoid getting blasted but not too far to break the chain. There are 5 blasts from each tornado before the next set of mechanics. With this positioning, the damage dealers will technically be the furthest players from the wind orbs, which will force the line AoEs to target them each time. To handle this without breaking any chains, all the damage dealers will stack up on one side of the boss for the first bait. As soon as the lines pop up, they'll move together to the other side of the boss to bait the second set. As soon as that second set pops up, they'll move back to the original position for one final bait. As they move away from the last set of baited lines, 4 players from each chain pair will be marked for air bump, and the boss will cast a massive donut attack. All players will need to move into the boss's melee range and then stand in assigned spots to share air bump with their chain partner. To keep this simple, we have the tank and the healer coming in from the north tornado stand on the north side, while the tank and healer from the south tornado stacks on the south. The 2 damage dealer groups will adjust to the east and west sides of the boss to avoid overlap. As soon as air bump resolves, all players must move directly behind the boss for the final conflag strike hit. At this point, each player pair can return to their assigned spots around the boss. Occluded fronts will spawn more wind orbs, and all damage dealers will be targeted for air bump. This will be shared around the boss in assigned positions and immediately followed by Storm of Fury. Players will have to move in their pairs to their assigned intercardinal spots, making sure not to cross the wind line AoEs to keep their tethers intact. INFERNO HOWL will deal more raid-wide damage here. Healers beware. Next up, a healer will be marked for Hands of Hell, and Occluded Front will spawn another round of wind orbs. This Hands of Hell will be assigned to all tanks and healers, and the players will angle their tethers towards their assigned intercardinal spots, making sure not to cross over the wind line AoEs again. Once the lines resolve, they can move further away to ensure eruptions don't cover the safe spot. All players can then move into the formed safe spot. The next Hands of Hell tether will mark up a damage dealer, and this set of tethers will be assigned to all damage dealers. At the same time, the tanks and healers will be targeted for air bump. To handle this combo, each damage dealer will also bring their tether towards their assigned intercardinal position, while their tank or healer partner stacks with them. Air bump resolves at the same time as the tethers do and the eruption telegraphs form, so all players will be free to move into the safe zone. At the same time, the primary tank will be targeted for Hands of Flame tankbuster combo. Tank swap and get ready for the incoming instant incineration and meteor strike. At this point, the boss will cast 2 ferostorms in a row, and players will need to adjust for each one in turn. A blue knockback marker will then appear on the edge of the platform, knocking back all players from that side. Be careful not to get punted into the wall. The boss will then jump to the same area and cast a final conflag strike. Since it's impossible to get behind them at this time, you need to destroy the boss before the cast goes off. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know. Up next, we'll head into Eden's Verse at Iconoclasm Savage. As always, thanks for watching. Till next time.